z-test or a t-test. Now we remember that a z-test is what we use when we know the population standard deviation. And a t-test is when that population standard deviation is unknown. Now the difference is small, but there is one. And so let's go ahead and drop the formulas on the board and we can discuss it. If I know the population standard deviation, I'm conducting a z-test. And we're still going to use our calculator to do this, but prior to doing that, you need to set up the formula, drop all the values in there, and show and express that you know what's going on. I wouldn't recommend dropping this formula in your calculator. There's just a lot of opportunities for order of operations errors. So z, this is that how many standard deviations away from the mean we are. It's going to show us how much evidence we have against our null hypothesis. It's a two-sample z-test, and so we're going to compare the two populations against each other, the two samples, rather, against each other. So I'm going to take the sample mean from my first population and compare that, that is to see the difference between the sample mean from my second population. And just like I have in the past, I'm going to divide by the population standard deviation, but this one is the difference between those population standard deviations, and so it's going to look like this. It's the square root standard deviation of the first over the sample size of the first population plus the standard deviation of the second over the sample size of the second. You'll notice that this is a plus, and even though we're finding the difference, we remember that standard deviations can only grow. That's why we're adding the two population standard deviations. So, all that being said, we want to find these values given to us in the problem, drop them in, show the equation, but then we are going to run a two-sample z-test in our TI calculator. And that's where the actual computation where you find the z and the p-value is going to take place. Now, a t-test is going to be slightly different. Again, we're comparing the two sample means, but instead of knowing the population standard deviation like we did with the z-test, we have to use the sample standard deviation for this one. So S sub 1 over N sub 1 plus S sub 2 over N sub 2. All right? So these little sub 1s and sub 2s is indicating which population we're talking about, which sample we're talking about in the particular problem. Okay? So there are the two formulas that you're going to use. This one would simply be a two-sample t-test in your TI calculator, and both of those will get you across the finish line. Make sure you know, is the standard deviation given in the problem, or is the standard deviation I'm using a result of the sample I took? That will tell whether you're doing a Z or a t-test.